Hello everybody, it's me, Fee Timms, also known as White Zulu. I must explain from the start that the old apartheid flag, die Vierkleur, in my new background does not represent a political statement in any way whatsoever. My autobiography, White Zulu, is not a political commentary, nor does it include any particular references to apartheid and what it entailed. That flag is consigned to history now, and as I had no means of imposing a photograph on top of it, it remains on my wall. All that flag represents is a piece of history covering the first 44 years of my life. So please ignore it as exactly what it is. A meaningless piece of cloth now consigned.
After a very late and exhausting night talking everything over, Celeste cornered me on my own while Pierre got ready to drive back to his job on the lakeside the next morning. And she began to try and worm information out of me. I was torn between my loyalty to Britta as well as Pierre. Most of all to Celeste, as she had been such a wonderful foster mother and I adored her and most importantly, respected her. I decided to come clean and told her as much as I knew, omitting the shoplifting, as I thought that would be too much for her to bear. Also, I was so ashamed that I hadn't told on them nor done anything active to stop them, just stood passively by and watched the two of them from outside in the street, pilfering away to their heart's content. I'd had no idea that Britta was taking contraceptive pills and had barely heard of them myself. I didn't know whether she and Pierre had slept together, and Celeste was very diplomatic in her questions about that. I was as honest and open about whatever I knew and could only tell her very little more than she knew already. We received a phone call from Pierre's older sister, Catherine, that night. Has he gone quite mad? She asked. He's about as immature a boy as I know. How can he get up and get married to a girl he hardly knows anything about, just like that? She was as incensed as her mother was, and Monsieur wasn't too impressed either. That girl's taking advantage of him, he said darkly, as he lit yet another Gauloise and drew on it deeply. Pierre won't have a say in this marriage, if it takes place at all, he added, gloomily. She's led him along by the nose, and now he'll be trapped and spend the rest of his life paying for his mistake. It upset me to see him so genuinely unhappy. He'd always been so kind and gentle and compassionate to me. I wanted to do everything in my power to put this right. Well, I've been invited to this wedding too, said Catherine to me on the phone. I'll come up this weekend and we'll have to find you an outfit to wear, and of course ask your parents' permission to fly over to Denmark to attend the event. It sounded quite exciting now, to me anyway, but Celeste was inconsolable. We'll have to try and talk him out of it, she said. Somehow, we must get him to open his eyes and see what a terrible mistake he's about to make. Will you help? She turned to me, really desperate, pleading in her eyes, and I saw the pain she was suffering as clearly as I'd seen her husband's deep sorrow. Even I had doubts about the potential success of this impending and rather hurried nuptials at the end of April, and I was as innocent and unworldly as they came. So, when Pierre came up again, still excited and full of wedding plans, Celeste asked me to take him out somewhere for lunch so we could talk about things. By this, she meant me, talking him out of marrying Britta. If I try to do it, he'll become even more determined, she complained. He's a very stubborn boy. Will you talk to him, please, she begged, and I said I'd do my best. Really liked Pierre and felt that I was betraying him when I told him about Britta's flirting with other boys and that she'd gone out with them sometimes. I didn't feel at all proud of what I was doing, just deeply ashamed at allowing Celeste to use me in this way. But I loved her and her husband more than I'd loved any other adults ever, and I wanted them both to be happy. So I carried on spilling the beans to Pierre about Britta's flirting with other boys when he was at work in Vevey, describing how she'd boasted about that in front of me. I didn't embellish nor repeat hearsay, just told him exactly and only what I'd heard from her and seen with my own eyes. And again, I didn't breathe a word about the shoplifting, as I somehow felt implicated in that by default, if nothing else. Pierre was deeply shocked when he heard that Britta had been seeing other boys in his absence. She lied to me, he exclaimed. She told me she stayed at home when Jonty went out with Louis and me, and that she only went skating with you two. No, I replied gently. She would dance cheek to cheek with boys none of us knew at the ice rink. The slow music was playing. I saw her myself. I was trying to let him down as kindly and gently as I could. This was a first for me, breaking news that could possibly ruin two people's lives. But it was the truth. I'd seen Britta's dancing, skating and skiing, as well as kissing and flirting with lots of guys, and had assumed that she and Pierre had some sort of open arrangement when they were apart. Also, I'd had absolutely no idea they were going to marry, nor so soon either. The wedding was only 5 weeks away. Pierre looked at me, searching my eyes for anything that might give him any hope whatsoever. Are you absolutely sure? He asked me in despair. I nodded. Every time we were together, she told me that I was the only guy she'd ever kissed, he groaned. That surprised me because I'd often seen her snogging boys, most of whom none of us knew the names of, on the skating rink. Jonty had always had her faithful companion, the gorgeous Louis and me, with her. But Britta had been a free soul, a free spirit, as was I, except that nobody wanted to get off with me, no matter how much I yearned for a French kiss from a local boy. She always looked as though she was enjoying every minute of it too, which rubbed salt into my wounds, as I didn't even have one boyfriend, and she had her beloved Pierre, plus so many others. Pierre dropped his head into his hands, and I thought he was going to cry. I have to go to Denmark right away, see her, talk to her, face to face. and ask some questions. He got up abruptly from the cafe table. Please don't tell her how you've heard these things, I pleaded. Don't let her know it was me who told you. I'm begging you. Britta was a good friend, and I don't want her to know that I've let out any of her secrets. Pierre put his arm around my shoulders and squeezed me gently. Don't worry, he said kindly. I won't tell her where it came from, you. Sorry, I won't tell her that it came from you. I'll say that friends of mine saw her with other guys and leave your name right out of it. I felt a tiny bit better now about what I'd done. Perhaps it would turn out to have been the right thing. I'd never been put on the spot like this before and had to make life-changing decisions for someone else. Catherine came up the weekend after Pierre's announcement, and she took me shopping in the village, just in case I needed a wedding outfit. I'd written to Jonty, assuming she'd already known of the wedding plans, even before they parted company, but I hadn't heard back yet. I'm sure she'd been invited to the wedding as well. While Catherine and I looked at dresses, she called me over. Look, she showed me a beautiful ankle-length dress in a floaty material. The colours were bright pinks, mauves, and deep purple, all abstract, enormous flowers, as was the fashion in the late 60s. Try it on, she said, and I did. It looked stunning. I was very slim and tall, and the dress clung to me like a second skin, flaring out just at knee length. The back was dangerously low, but the front, slightly cowl-like, was modest, and it had little capped sleeves. I turned in front of the full-length mirror several times. This would be the first time I'd ever had a dress that wasn't either a hand-me-down from one of my sisters or, even worse, my middle-aged aunt. It was brand new and fitted perfectly. Catherine looked at the price tag. It's quite cheap, she said, well within your price range. I wonder what it's made of. She examined the label. Since I'd never been in this position before, I hadn't even thought to look at the label. I was completely out of my depth. She showed me the label. It said pura seta. That means pure silk, exclaimed Catherine excitedly. They must have made a mistake. A dress made from pure silk can't possibly cost so little. And feeling the material against her cheek, she said, it feels like silk. We have to buy it for you. Even if the wedding doesn't go ahead, you'll have this beautiful dress for next to nothing. She lent me the amount I needed on the understanding I'd go to the bank and draw out all my allowance the next day and pay her back. And I paid for the dress, watching proudly as the shopkeeper carefully wrapped it in layers of tissue paper. I had the good sense not to parade it in front of the Henchoz parents, as they were still distraught. Pierre was in Denmark with Britta, and they were now afraid that the two of them would elope, as the parents had put up so much resistance to the marriage. Pierre is so pig-headed, he'd quite likely go off and do something stupid, like marry her on the spot there and then in Denmark. What have we done, mourned Silet. Catherine was inclined to agree, and I wouldn't have put it past him to do something so impulsive either. Mum and Dad, not knowing nothing about the domestic drama, going on Chez en Show, had given permission for me to go to Denmark with their family to attend the wedding at the end of that month. A tiny bit of me was hoping to get to Denmark and do a bit of sightseeing. But what I wanted most of all was for this family I'd so quickly grown to love to be happy again. That's all for now. More of the drama to come next week. I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you so much for listening. And it's goodbye from me. And see you next week. Bye-bye and thank you.
That is all for the time being, and there's more to come next week. I would like to thank John Moslane for putting aside his Friday afternoons to help me produce these videos. Without him, I could not do this. I would also like to thank Sean van Vuren for his sterling work in uploading my videos to my YouTube channel, adding the photos, as well as managing my channel so professionally. If you would like to know more about my other works, I have written 5 books in all, and each one is autobiographical. Please visit my website at www.whitezulubook.com, where you will find a lot more information as well as plenty of photographs. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed my life story, and there is plenty more to come. A thumbnail photo will be attached each week, and thank you so much for all your support and all the very kind remarks you make in complimenting me on my work. I really appreciate it.